have to sign off.
Yeah, just to save a bit of time, let me focus in on online voting. I think President Banda mentioned one of the obstacles to the widespread use, and that's digital access. That's a huge problem in the third world, but it's also a problem in some first world countries. In the United States, we have close to 90% digital access, but there are places, mostly rural, mostly poor, where the access is below 60%. But I want to talk a little bit about a second obstacle. 2 years ago, our National Academy of Sciences looked at the possibility of online voting, looked at it deeply, and concluded that it's too risky at this point, that there's not enough security surrounding it, too vulnerable to hacking. All of those things would really undermine legitimacy if it occurred. And so they recommended against it. And I think as long as that's the case, it's almost too early to begin pushing this idea, because I do think, in addition to the kind of voices we could expect to oppose it for partisan political reasons, there'd be a lot of authoritative voices that would be cautioning against this kind of movement. And the problem becomes when both sets of voices come together, you're going to have a fairly large number of people who are going to conclude that it's too risky. And once they get to that point, boy, then it's really hard to bring them back at a point where you'd like them to consider that possibility. We see that in the United States around a lot of issues, partly for reasons that have already been talked about, but there's so much disinformation out there. We now have a huge kind of anti-vaccine constituency in this country. And there's some worry even when we get a vaccine that it's going to be hard to get to herd immunity, because there's going to be a percentage of the population that's going to refuse vaccination. So once these attitudes get worked into the public, they're really hard to get out. And if people believe that online voting is unsafe, then we've got a real problem on our hands. So once we have a system, I think there's still going to be problems getting buy-in on the part of the public, and for reasons that have been talked about. This is not a very favorable environment to sell changes or to convince people about the importance of changes in the political process. If we had high trust in government, and if we had high social trust, that's when you want to make change. And we don't have either one of those at the moment. And it really opens the door to disinformation, but even more to receptivity to that disinformation. So I think we've got to go a little bit slowly on this notion of online voting. I think we have to put a couple of things in place. One, I think we have to create secure systems for online voting. I mean, that's a technological problem, and we're not quite there yet, but we need to get there. Then I think we need to start talking about it just generally. Begin the educational process, not in the sense of immediate implementation, but getting people accustomed to the idea and the benefits of it. And there really are substantial benefits to online voting. And that's the educational problem. And then I think cases are important. I think there are countries where this can work now, and they're most likely kind of smaller democracies in a large democracy like the United States. We have a very complex electoral system. It would be very hard to implement online voting in our system in any sort of systematic way. But test cases where we basically see the advantages, discover the weaknesses, they can serve a real purpose in terms of being able to kind of advance in the long run a particular idea. We've seen that, for example, in the United States around mail-in voting. Oregon has been doing it for quite a long time now. And, when the arguments came up in the United States about the need to go to more mail-in voting because of COVID, there's a partisan pushback on that. One of the best sources of evidence against that argument is Oregon's experience with mail-in voting. They've been doing it for a long time, and the rate of fraud in that system is something on the order of about 1 in 10 million ballots cast as a fraudulent ballot. So that can be done safely. There's a point where online voting can be done safely. And I think if we work into this slowly, cautiously, get those test cases out there, when it comes to adopting it on a more widespread level, we'll have in place the things that we need to get the kind of buy-in and get people to understand this is a legitimate way to conduct elections.
Excellent.